This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent, but this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
So welcome everybody to A Silent War Within. Happy to have you here today, as always. Michaela, our guest, couldn't join us today. She's got other things going on. So it's just going to be the two Kevins for you. Our guest is Keven McNeill. Your host is Kevin Witzel, as always. We've had some really great outreaches lately. You guys are utilizing what we offer. You're utilizing our peer support that we try to give, and we've got a team of volunteers that helps with that. So that's super exciting that that's finally gotten established, something that we're pushing toward. I've done a few more public speaking events, which has been really cool. I actually got noticed in public for the first time the other day, which was very, very weird for me. I'm not one to take that type of spotlight all the time when it comes to just being out and about, but people are recognizing this from our TikTok videos and our social media presence, which is super awesome. We super excited about that. As always, you can find us on all the social media platforms. But today I want to introduce you to somebody who I think is really special. He's got a really great background. He started a peer support nonprofit, right? Is that right, Kevin? A peer support nonprofit? Correct. Is that what it's categorized as?
Yes.
So awesome guy. He's got a lot of experience. I want him to tell you about it. So this is Keven McNeill. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, and kind of some of the struggles you may have faced that kind of led to starting this peer support journey that you've been on.
Wow. Yeah, no, there's, well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm really glad we were able to connect on such an important issue. So as far as my background, I started in the volunteer fire service when I was 16 years old, little fire company. Was able to kind of cut my teeth on what it's like to be a first responder. Decided I wanted to be a police officer. So I ended up we joke about it now, but I think I took the wrong test. But I became a police officer right at the age of 21 and pressed on in my career until around 2016, when unfortunately I was assaulted on the job. It was a traffic stop that went bad. And that's when I first started to notice that I had an issue. And I was diagnosed with PTSD. Back then it was PTSD. I kind of, that's really where my journey started, and I didn't take it serious. I kind of ignored the diagnoses and just kind of pressed on. And, 2020, everything just blew up for me. And that's really where things went sideways. I found myself in front of a clinician trying to claw my way back onto the job. I was on administrative leave. I was abusing alcohol. I had all these issues, and, took a couple months, but I was able to get back on the job. And then in 2022, I decided enough was enough, and I left policing after 19 years on the job. And so when I left policing, I wanted nothing to do with any first responder world or anything. In fact, I just wanted to go crawl in a hole and hide for the rest of my life. But I made a promise to a little boy that when he turned 14, that we would join the firehouse. And my son reminded me of that promise. And next thing I know, I'm back in the first responder world and volunteering again. And I started to see that we have a problem, and we have a major problem when it comes to mental health and folks not dealing with it properly. So I started a nonprofit organization, and the rest is history. It just kind of exploded from there.
So on top of all that, you just recently wrote a book called Pushing It Down. It's on my reader list. I haven't gotten to it yet. I just finished American Sirens, I think it is. It's the Kevin Hazard story that kind of chronicles the first paramedics that came into the nation. Great book. Yours is next on the list. So tell us about the book and how all this cumulative weight finally caught up to you and what pushed you to write this book.
So in 2020, I found myself in a very dark place. Part of the process of clawing my way back to finding myself again was I started to write. I had a therapist who said that it was something that could help me find my way. And I just started to write in the middle of the night when I had insomnia. And I just kind of poured everything onto the pages. And the original manuscript for Pushing It Down was about 600 pages. So clearly I'm not going to dump that on somebody and expect them to read it. So I was able to kind of cut things back, and I really didn't publish it until earlier last year. But the biggest take on the book, and I think this is something that's often overlooked in many circles, is the fact that our trauma doesn't start the day we put on the uniform. Our trauma starts well before that, and for many of us. And for those that don't come onto the job with any trauma, that are just have no bumps in the road, I truly envy those folks, because I haven't found one yet in the first responder community. It seems as though there's some pull, that's something that happens early in life that pulls us into this profession. So I wanted to explore that, and I wanted to figure out where my trauma came from. And I really drilled it down to one specific incident in my life when I was 8 years old, and I saw my friend die in a DUI crash. And that's really what started my journey to the first responder community. And, since then, I've just been driven. It's something that's deep inside me. I want to help others. And that's something that I explore in the book, on how helping others and how that purpose can also be your downfall. And ultimately, that's what the book is about, is about my experiences with going through the process of trying to get a disability pension, trying to figure things out, and trying to reconnect with my family. And just, it's a very raw and emotional book. I didn't pull any punches with it. And I just wanted to put it out there to try to help my fellow brothers and sisters.
It's one of the things that I find very surprising since doing this podcast, and it's been every guest. I have not found anybody that is immune to this, but I almost feel like that every single first responder has some type of trauma that they are carrying from, whether it be childhood, teenage years, early adulthood. Everybody comes in, like you said, with this trauma. I've not met anybody on the show so far. I know a few in my personal life, but I've not met any of the guests on the show that don't bring some form of trauma with them. I think that's always very interesting when you really get to looking at it. That I think part of the reason we get into this is because we want to be what we didn't have, or what we didn't have in that moment of crisis, like what you described, or you saw something that interested you because you wanted to know what to do in that situation. I've heard all of those. So I think it's a really interesting reason to write a book, especially one called Pushing It Down, since we all so blatantly do that every day. So when you deconstruct this title, did you feel like you had more pushing it down with your emotions and with the things you saw and with what you dealt with and with your PTSD? Did you feel like that was more prevalent in the fire department or the police department, or was it just all kind of hinged together?
Well, for many years, it blended together, and especially early on in my life. And the transition from the volunteer fire service to being a police officer, I learned very quickly that you can't show any emotion as a police officer. You have to have that stoic face and persona out there. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that really started to affect me, because you can just do that for so long. And eventually what happens is all that stuff just bubbles to the surface. And for me, it was 2016 is when it just finally came to the surface. I could not keep it down anymore, no matter what I tried to do. And I took a hard look at myself, and I had just become a shell of who I was and who I wanted to be. So really, I think it's one of those things that, because it's cumulative and because it's a slow burn that's below the surface, is that when you're dealing with the traumas on the job, your current time, it's all affecting you, whether you realize it or not. And it affects your decision making. And at the end of the day, I don't care how much training you can have on this. If you're not processing that trauma out of the amygdala and getting it out there and putting it to the prefrontal cortex and really, really dealing with it, it's going to continue to affect you. And it can affect every part of the job. And unfortunately for me, it really started to come out towards the end of my career, where I couldn't, it was like once the lid was off the pot, it was just bubbling over. And the only thing I could really do in the end was make the tough decision. I mean, I could have stayed another 5 years to retirement, but honestly, I took a hard look at it, and I decided that for my family and for me, the best thing to do was to leave the job.
Do you think that there was one culture that was more dangerous than the other in the sense of mental health? Because I feel like after interviewing a few police officers, what I find is the police environment is maybe a little less forgiving than the fire department side. Is that your experience as well, or did you have something different?
No, I had the same experience. In fact, when in 2016, when I came forward with being diagnosed with PTSD, I had a conversation with the chief at the time, and I told him, I'm struggling, chief. I'm getting help, but I just want to let you know I was in a very dark place when I was out on administrative leave for my injury. I could tell the minute I told him that, my career was over. There was nothing I could do to return after that. So it was a tough decision to come forward. I knew the what was going to happen to me. I knew that my career would be I'd be blacklisted. But at the same time, I felt that I couldn't keep it in anymore, and that maybe if I just mentioned it, people would understand why I was acting the way I was acting and making the decisions I was making. and that would humanize the badge. And that's the problem in the police world. They don't humanize the badge. I find in the fire service, they tend to do it a little more, but the police world, I mean, they dehumanize it so much. They expect you to act like a robot. And when you show any emotion, you're weak. And they can sit there and tell you, these administrators can tell you that's not the truth, but I'm telling you, that's the reality of it. And that's what I saw in my own career. And that's what I hear consistently as a peer support advocate.
Last week, as a matter of fact, and you guys know this from listening to the show, but we had a police officer on that was involved in a officer involved critical incident, wound up shooting and killing a suspect. Really, really bared heavy on what he did moving forward. But one of the things that I found just really wild, for lack of better terminology, was the fact that his whole department ghosted him when he got into the throes of his mental health crisis. They really just became absent altogether. And I think that's one of the things that your organization is fighting against, offering peer support the same way we are. I think we're very similar in that we're trying to offer support for those who feel ghosted. But did you have an experience where you mentioned your captain, but what about your brothers in arms, if you will? Did you get kind of abandoned during that time, or was it talked about kind of as scuttlebutt, if you will, like, oh, Kevin's having a bad time? Or did you feel supported by your peers versus your captain?
So at the time, I was a peer support member within the agency. So I was trained and I was active as a peer member. So I kind of knew the inner workings of the team at the time. And one of the things that was really disheartening was both times in 2016 and 2020, when I was struggling, nobody reached out. And it was especially upsetting in 2020 because I had already come out and said that, I told my teammates, listen, I'm struggling. I've been through this. At the time, I was in a good place, but then I kind of relapsed. And when I tried to explain that to him, and again, it's that humanizing the badge. When I tried to tell him, listen, I'm having these normal human reactions to these traumatic events that I'm seeing on the job. I'm struggling, and they just kind of they go the checkbox approach. It's like they completely dehumanize it. One of the first things that was asked to me in 2020 is, are you gonna kill yourself? And I found it so just demoralizing. And I'm like, that's not even where I was at. Yes, in 2016 there was the thoughts, but because I mentioned in 2016, that was the automatic, are you gonna kill yourself? And in 2020 it was, listen, I was drinking heavy. I was in a really dark place. I was in a position within the agency that I was under the microscope. I was trying to vie for this position as a full-time detective when I had worked so hard on my career. I'd put in for 16 times. Finally, they gave me an opportunity to be a detective, but they're like, you have 6 months to prove yourself. And then they ground me into the ground, man. Like they kept their thumb right on top of me. And it was like they wanted me to fail, but I was refusing to give in. And unfortunately, I made some mistakes because of the stress of the job and because I was drinking heavy. And then I acknowledged those mistakes. I told the truth. But then in the end, I mean, I took my licks and I came back, but I was different. When I came back after that administrative leave, I was completely different. And I saw myself in a different light and I saw everything, I saw
Sure.
the real people. It's like, the Oz, you pull back the curtain and whoa, this is what it is. These people do not care about me. These people don't care. And it's not just me. I say me, but it's they don't care about each other. There's no brotherhood. It's a joke. There's no thin blue line. And it's sad because, you really need to rely on your brothers and sisters when the chips are down. And, if you can't rely on them, how can the public rely on them? Like how? But, at the end of the day, I think it's a leadership issue. I truly don't think it's an interpersonal issue. I think it comes down to poor leadership and not being clear and not holding your folks accountable and making sure that they're checking in with their people.
I'm a leader at a very large children's hospital. I try my best not to say the name of the facility, not to get attached to my job and things like that. It it always has perplexed me how other leaders, and I can recall this one particular time, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm sitting in this room full of other high level administrators, people who are, I'm over about 50 people, but I'm sitting in a room with literally people that are supposed to be taking care of hundreds of people, within their department. And our chief nursing officer asked, why do you think you guys are doing so well in recruiting and maintaining your associates and hire associate survey scores. And I thought for a second, and our answer, because we're a 3 management team member staff, my answer was we go and sit with them. And it was almost like an audible gasp from everybody that we take an hour, hour and a half every day to go and visit our crews and just sit there. We're doing nothing more than just talking. That's it. Just being human, just having conversations with people. And they were just so taken aback that we would waste 90 precious minutes to sit with our people. And I think that's part of the problem. We've as leaders, we dehumanize ourselves and get away from the people, and we recluse to our offices where we're doing all the administrative tasks. But we have to be present. We have to be available. And I think people have lost that.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Some of the best questions or conversations I've ever had with my supervisors over a cup of coffee. It's not like, hey, come to my
Yeah.
office and you're being ordered in to have that conversation. It's just them checking in, maybe coming car to car in your beat and just saying, hey, how's everything going? How's your family? I mean, that goes the distance for folks. That really gets them to a point in which they're going to be dedicated to the department if they feel like they're being cared about. I mean, it's simple. What's that cost the agency? Honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, that's nothing. So,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, and here's where I'll put myself out there. Unfortunately, what happens is they promote the wrong people. They get these folks that are just moving up the chain as quickly as possible, and they don't care who they step on. And as a result of that, they are ruining lives. And that's a huge, huge problem. And again, that's something I hear about in the work that I do now, but that's something I experienced for 19 years as a police officer. I saw it countless times where people were just stepping on each other to get ahead. And it was really sad. There's also something, have you heard of moral injury? You're familiar with that when it comes to
Absolutely.
PTS?
Yep.
So my
Absolutely.
friend, when I heard about moral injury and I started looking into it more, and that's what you'll appreciate when you read the book, you're going to see a ton of moral injury, and it's something I didn't realize how deep it was cutting me as a human being to see this stuff on the job and to see. And when I say it's not necessarily the public, it's the inner workings of the agency and how just nefarious people can be and evil people can be, and how much of an impact that can have on your psyche and your overall well being. And once I figured that out, that was like one of the missing parts. Once I figured that out, I knew I had to jump ship because it was sinking.
I have been there all too many times. I actually speak about moral injury and how administration, also calls, also general public can play into that moral injury side of things and how it's pushing us against what some of our core beliefs are. And it took me going to therapy to actually figure out what are my core beliefs. The first time a therapist said, write down your core beliefs. I'm like, well, I'm not sure. And you have to start thinking about like, what are my core beliefs? What are things that I stand for? What are things that are non-negotiables? And it took me going through that exercise of having to sit down and really think about those. Kids are not supposed to die. The public is supposed to accept us as helpers. You'll stand for your family, those type of things. And when anything pushes against that or pushes against the well-being of that, I think you can incur pretty big moral injury. But I want to shift a little bit. And we were talking about this before the show, but you have a pretty extensive education in this, right? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I'm pretty impressed.
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, so as far as my educational background, so I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and psychology. I have a master's in public administration, emergency management, but I just completed about 2 years ago now my doctorate in education with the focus on the psychology of leadership. So I'm very passionate when it comes to leadership. And a lot of it comes from that moral injury, right? Seeing that throughout my career and seeing leaders make really poor decisions led me to study leadership, to try to figure things out and to try not to repeat some of the errors I saw and some of the, again, that nefarious behavior of those leaders. So, but yeah, that's as far as my background.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so if you're talking to a leader, say you've got me one-on-one, which is kind of what we're doing right now, because obviously we're not live. But say you've got me one-on-one and you go through some of my habits and you find out that, hey, this guy is causing some type of moral injury. I recognize that what he's doing is going to go against normal core beliefs. What do you say to that leader? I mean, how do you talk them away from some of their actions?
Well, I'm a true believer when it comes to leadership. I think it's a democracy. I don't think it's a dictatorship. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's times in a command position where you need to order somebody to do something. They need to do it. There's no questions asked, especially you get a structure fire, you get something serious. That's
Right.
why we have command. But when it comes to when you can slow things down and you can start to think things through, organizational change type stuff, democracy is where it's at. So I would tell the leader that they really need to do a self inventory and try to figure out, are they being more ordering people because of their rank, or what's going on with them as far as their decision making process, and where in that can they add some democracy, and allow these folks, are your people, to give you input. Don't come in there thinking you know all the answers, because the reality of it is there's probably somebody in the room that has a little more
Mhm.
information than you, that if you lean on that person, first of all, they're going to make you look great as a leader because it's going to make your job easier because you can count on them. You're going to have a better outcome at the end of the day. It's really, really taking the input of your people, doing those check-ins like we just talked about, having a cup of coffee with folks, just having a conversation, see what's going on. That'll give you a great temperature of what's going on within the agency.
Mhm.
Sometimes just listen more than you talk. I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's peer support 101. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
listen to your people, because you'll pick up on a lot of cues that you're going to miss if you're the one doing the talking at every meeting, and trying to control. And I hate that word micromanage. I mean, it's just, especially in emergency services, because you can't micromanage people. You have to trust your people. They're going to do the right thing. Don't get me wrong. If they do something wrong, you need to hold them accountable, but make it well known. You're going to be held accountable, but I trust you. But
Mhm.
it's just building those relationships. And to get back to what I said earlier about humanizing things, you need to humanize the folks behind the uniform, behind the badge. If you don't do that, and you just treat everybody like a number, no one's going to want to work for you. No one's going to want to be around you.
Mm.
You're going to walk out of the room and they're going to talk smack about you. I know that's what I did, right? Like,
Mhm.
we all had those leaders where we're
Right.
like, oh, great. Yeah. Okay. So, Johnny Smith is up there running his mouth again. We don't trust him, right?
Right.
Like, right. It's
Yeah.
just coming down to being a decent human being. This stuff is not hard. Leadership's not hard.
Mm.
You just gotta get your ego, keep it in check, and not let it interfere with things.
And that's one of the things I have become. Previously, I was never a reader. I did not care to read. I have found it very therapeutic as I have aged. However, I also accompany that in my drives back and forth to work because I live about 45 minutes away from work. So I started listening to books as well and find that very therapeutic for my drive to work. It kind of chills me out. Somebody's got a baby. I hear it.
Yeah, that's my therapy dog.
I love it. But, I have found that it just releases some of that, like, just anxiety, I guess is the right word, where I'm just anxious to get to work. I'm anxious to do something, or I'm very anxious when I lay down to sleep. And I found that just taking some time to read and take in some information is great. But you said something earlier, uh, that I wanna almost circle back to. You said that when we're going through these things, we're having normal physical reactions, and you talked about some brain chemistry and some other things that go on. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I find that extremely interesting, and we've only had one guest on the show that went into some of the kind of brain what happens in our brain when we're experiencing these traumas or moral injury. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Sure. So as far as a traumatic event, so essentially what happens is that that event gets trapped into the amygdala, and your amygdala is that fight, or freeze. So what can happen is you can have an event today, a week from now, you're having flashbacks, you're having all these issues physiologically. It's just like you're being back at the event. So a lot of times, what happens in an event is you have, and I don't know what they do out your way, but there's different approaches peer teams use to process that trauma out of your amygdala. Because if it gets stuck in there, it's going to be there for a long time, and it's really going to be very difficult to function, because you're just going to have that trauma piling up in the amygdala. So there's two approaches that are kind of, or really one approach that's more the norm, but there's a new one that's on the horizon that's we're starting to use more, and I find it extremely fascinating. The first one is your critical incident stress management, right? Your SISM teams come in, they do a debriefing, they sit in a circle, they talk about the event, and kind of point towards everybody's perception of it and the feelings of it, and so on. And that's supposed to reduce the feeling of distress, and get it out of a little bit out of the amygdala, and bring it to the prefrontal cortex, and it kind of disperse out into your brain. But there's something new, and I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it's called Acute Stress Adaptive Protocol, or ASAP. Have you heard of that before?
I have not heard of that. Can you explain that to me?
So this is something I'm extremely excited about. I was trained in it last year. Have you heard of EMDR at
Yes,
all?
absolutely.
EMDR therapy? Okay. So it's I'm not allowed to call this EMDR because it's not EMDR, because it's peer led, but essentially it has the same concepts, some of the concepts of EMDR. So when you sleep at night and you have rapid eye movement, that's pulling stuff in your brain. That's your way of kind of your processing in your brain, and it's filing things in different parts of your brain. So if you think of trauma, it's like an incomplete into the amygdala. It's not a full process. It's not process property where it's not the prefrontal, like your rational thinking. It's still in the animal part of your brain, if you think of it that way. So with ASAP, Acute Stress Adaptive Protocol, it's peer led, so you can be trained in. It's 32 hours for the training, and essentially what it does is it pulls out that trauma out of the amygdala, and it's through what they call, and I'm not going to go like deep into the science because I don't want to bore you, but it's what it uses bilateral stimulus. So you're connecting both hemispheres, the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and you're either doing it's tapping, so you're tapping, alternate tapping. You're picturing the worst part of the actual event, and you're trying to focus on that, and your brain's connecting. So it's connecting and it's pulling it out of the amygdala. And then what it does is after you're done with the entire processing through ASAP, you do it's 3 sleep cycles. So you have that REM sleep, everything's processing, so that when you recall that stressful event, there's no emotion attached to it. You don't have that fight, flight, or freeze attached. So I'll be honest with you, when I first was training, I was really skeptical. I'm like, this is, there's like sometimes those little like things out there. You see it on TikTok, right? Like somebody comes up with, if you rub this crystal 3 times, like you're gonna, all of a sudden you're cured, right? Like, so I was like, oh, is this really legit? Is this, but, the more research I did and the deeper I dove into it, and then once I was trained on it, I was starting to see the value in it. And then I actually set through an ASA and I was convinced. It like blew my mind. It was something that happened 20 years ago. It was a traumatic event. And it was an infant death. And I was able to process it. And then 3 days later, every time I recalled that event, even to this day, there's no distress attached to it. I can actually walk my mind through that event. I can talk about that event. I don't get choked up when I talk about it. That's how powerful this stuff is. So if you can imagine, if we can get this out into the peer support realm, or if we can get this nationwide, just the number of lives we're going to affect, the number of people we're going to help through their darkest times. The fact that we can use this as a maintenance, you can do drop-in ASAPs where people just show up and they process whatever they want. And it doesn't have to be something that just happened. It could be anything in their life. So since then, so this was February of last year, I was trained in it. We deployed it in the peer support where we have 18 members on the team trained in it. We've done 44 ASAPs since then, major traumatic events. We've had 100% success rate. We've had everybody come around and they're not showing signs of distress anymore. Some folks had some pretty severe incidents. So what we did is we piggybacked with EMDR, and we had our EMDR therapist work with them. So it was a little more distress that we could really get out with the ASAP, because sometimes if it's really distressing, if it's like so think of a pain scale, 0, no pain, to a lot of pain, stress, 0, no distress, 10 through the roof, like you want to jump out of your skin. So people were coming in at like a 10. So obviously that was like one of those things we tried to put them through the ASAP, but they needed EMDR. They needed somebody to come in and work with them one-on-one for a prolonged period. But overall, we've had 100% success rate. It's really, really going well up in our area. If anybody's interested, it's the Vermont First Responder Wellness Center does the training. Sonny Pervetto and his team. He's a phenomenal therapist, former state trooper, Vermont state trooper, and he invented.
Give me that name
ASAP.
again. I mean, I know we're recorded, but give me the name again.
Sonny Pervetto, and don't ask me to spell it. I can't do it on the fly.
I'll figure that one out.
But Vermont. So if you go, it's asap-training.com, I believe is the website. But highly recommend it. And we're looking to become a training school here in Connecticut.
That's all.
So we're going to bring it to our state, and again, we're having huge success with it. And I just, I see this. I personally, I wish this was in 15, 20 years ago. I would have found this. I think it would have helped me out a lot. So
yeah, for sure. No, that's super interesting. I could talk about that. You would not bore me with any of your science talk. I promise you. Yeah, I think that's really cool. There's a guy, and you may be familiar with him. His name's Dan Jarvis. He does Healing the Hero, but he has a very similar approach. It's not this completely, but I watched him do it at a conference and it was amazing. It was a drop-in session, and that's what he referred to it too. He just asked for volunteer, but it was wild. And his, and I'm sure this is backed up by science as well, but he had numerous brain scans that showed, before and after. And it was really one of those things that you don't think about that it would work. You don't think about how both sides of the brain are not necessarily connected, and we store things differently. It takes sleep cycles. All of this new treatment coming out just is so encouraging to see and so exciting to see. And I think one of the things that we often do is we expect that trauma is going to be this loss of life, a line of duty death, mass casualty incident. And sometimes it can be a little bit more subtle. Sometimes it just piles on. You have 2 or 3 calls that just kind of pile on, or you have 2 or 3 patients that follow you home. or you have 3 or 4 critical incidences that really just get to you and you don't let it out and it just all starts to well up and this cumulative toll starts to happen.
Yeah, no, and in my own case, it wasn't just one event. I mean, when I look back, and that's why when I was writing the book, I really explored a lot of the events, and I kind of I highlighted the ones that were pretty severe. But the reality of it is, it was just a slow drip. It was just constant cumulative stress. And if you think of it this way, so typical person, 1 to 5 traumatic events in their lifetime, right? Like typical first
Mhm.
responder, 20-year career, you're looking 4,800. It's so first responders just never have time to properly process it, because what do? We tend to self-medicate with, coffee, alcohol, nicotine. We're all sleep deprived because we're doing shift work. So nobody ever gets really
Mhm.
caught up on that. So your brain's not getting those 3 sleep cycles after an event, and you're just never fully processing all that trauma. So what happens is it just goes out into the body, and it creates other issues, whether it's weight gain or problems with different organs in your body, and you can't run from it for too long before it starts to come out in other ways. That's, I mean, a lot of times think about that. Like you can see on people's faces if they're struggling, and a lot of it is because not to give a book plug, but they pushed it down for so long. It's literally bubbling out of their pores, and it's pretty obvious to see once you know
Yeah.
what you're looking for. And to get back to when I got into the first responder world again in 2022, I saw it everywhere. I was just amazed. All these guys and gals were just um, not not handling their stuff properly, and it was weighing them down big time. Especially, I mean, you look in the volunteer world, a lot of these people holding full-time jobs, and then they're volunteering all hours of the day, and it's extremely hard to do.
So when somebody comes to the realization, I'm in a bad place, I realize I pushed all this stuff down. Where do they start? Where do they begin?
So what I do with them is, the first thing is I put them through an ASAP. So I do Acute Stress Adaptive Protocol. I say, okay, let's run you through an ASAP. Let's do a baseline. Let's see where you're at. Let's see where your level of distress is. And part of it, easing into the ASAP, is you do a mindful exercise. You do some meditation. We don't First responders, we don't like to slow down our minds, right? When we slow down our
That's
minds,
right.
that's when bad stuff pops in, right? So just kind of slowing it down for that 3 to 5 minutes and running into a mindful exercise, and seeing where their level of distress is at, and then giving them that positive cognition. How many times do we talk negative to ourselves throughout the day, right? So you install a
Right.
positive memory, a positive cognition, and then you go right into the trauma. We're gonna hit something, like let's do some sort of trauma that's distressing you right now. It doesn't have to be your big one. It doesn't have to be the mother of all trauma. Let's just hit something, that whatever comes into your mind. Let's process it. You would be surprised, just that 1 45-minute ASAP, how many people come out the other side and they're like, I want to do an ASAP again. I want to go hit some more trauma. I want to do this. Like, it's just amazing to see. So really, when a person finds their voice, and that's probably the hardest part, right? Like, to say I need help is to, like, just come forward,
Mhm.
especially if you're in some sort of role where it's very difficult to do that, whether police, fire, wherever, some sort, it's your leader or someone, people count on you, your crew counts on you, just to come forward and say you're struggling. That's probably the hardest part. So when somebody says that to me, I usually perk up, because I know it wasn't easy for them to make the phone call, send the email, send me a message. So I acknowledge that right away. I thank them for that, and then I tell them, all right, we're gonna get through this.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And I say this often. I had a very critical incident for me. I think it depends on who it is, where they are, what line of work they're in. But I had a child drowning that I've talked about so many times on this show, and it sent me just over the edge. I mean, I was done. I was tapped out. And what I started to realize through seeking help, and we had a peer support team then, even in 2017, we were uh early on and kind of getting into this, but even having somebody that could support me a little bit just didn't feel like enough because I felt I needed somebody to tell me I wasn't alone. And I think that part of that feeling that I had was that I just felt like nobody else could feel like I do. Nobody knows what I'm going through. And in reality, that's not true. There's multiple people that have been out there, and I became very much a version of myself that was this angry responder all the time. That's how I coped or dealt with it, or that's what I had become, as a very angry responder. Everything just frustrated me. I was mad at everyone on the planet. How do you deal with somebody who's just angry but knows they need help?
That's a great question. Let's face it, when you're seeing anger, especially the peer to peer level, when you're seeing anger, it's usually a mask for something else. There's usually something going
Mhm.
on deep down and within that person. So if you listen to their words carefully, you can kind of get a direction to go. Sometimes just ask someone, hey, why are you so angry? Like it's just out of character for you. You're just starting with that, opening line. You'd be surprised how many folks will just open up with that. But you get those seasoned, grizzled first responders. They're probably, depending on who you are, they're probably not going to have that conversation with you because
Right.
I know at least when I was coming up through the ranks, you didn't talk to the senior guys. If you did, it was you were taking the report, and that was the only thing they were telling you is what was going to go in the report, right? So you weren't going to have those private conversations. But to get back to it, as far as what to say, I think it's just trying to get that person out of the elements. So if you have to do it while you're in uniform, do it. But if you can get that person in civilian clothes away from the job, and maybe that starts with a text, hey man, you want to meet up for coffee? You want to just meet up and fill in the blank? And then have that conversation with them and say, listen, I'm noticing X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm noticing. I might be off myself. I don't know, but I just want to let you know it's coming up. And if I care about you, reassure them I care about you, and I just want to make sure you're heading in the right direction because I don't see this ending well for you if you keep in this direction. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, with first responders, if you have to be blunt. You have to be blunt with things because we see through the bullshit, right? We see
Yeah.
through it. Like
Exactly.
our radars go off all the time. So sometimes
Mm.
just coming at somebody straight is the best way. I know in the peer world, sometimes I make people uneasy because I talk about mental health and I'm very frank about it, but it's because I have to. I'm not going to hide behind things. It's all my life is out in the open. I mean, you could just read the book or any of the things I've written. It's out there, so I can't hide from anything.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
bet.
but the anger though, again, if you watch closely, you'll hear it in the words, you'll hear it and you'll see it in their actions. You'll drill down to what that is. And in your case, my guess would be you felt as though you couldn't do enough in that situation.
That's
That
exactly it.
maybe your training failed you. So I would
Hmm.
lead with that with you and say, listen, I've been there myself, or my training failed me, and that's a normal human reaction to it. So, which by the way, to get to PTSD or PTS now, that's a big part of PTS, right? You feel like you failed. Your training failed you. You couldn't do enough, and then you develop that inner monologue, that negative self-talk, which eventually will lead to symptomology and problems down the road with PTS if you're not careful.
It took me, even with somebody kind of trying their best to kind of be there for me and kind of just the pat on the back. Hey, I'm here for you. If you need anything, let me know. It was really odd that I felt like that question, if you need anything, let me know, or that statement rather, put the weight back on me. Like it
Yeah.
was, I almost felt like what I tell my folks that work for me, just do. When somebody loses a family member or something, don't ask, what do you need me to do for you? That's putting more weight on them. Just take them something to eat or buy their lunch or whatever it is to be kind to that person. But I felt the same way when I was going through my PTS. And it was really difficult to put that into words. And it took me about 3 years to finally reach out to somebody and go, hey, I'm not okay. And it took this big explosion on my family, and everybody was scared of angry Kevin. And it was at that moment I was like, I got to do something. But when I went, I was very skeptical of therapy. I was very skeptical of getting help. How do you take all this, whether it be EMDR, whether it be talk therapy, whether it be the ASAP, whether it anything else? How do you demysticize this for somebody who is very skeptical of therapy and somebody who says, "Oh, that's just a bunch of BS. I'm not doing that." What do you say to that person to kind of bring them into that world of it's okay to talk, it's okay to get help?
So I often tell folks it's sloppy, it's not linear, and everybody their path looks different, right? To recover because PTS is a recovery, okay? And I tell them it's not going to be as glamorous as you think it's going to be. You're really going to have to put the microscope back on yourself. Yeah, you can explore all your traumas. You can do that through talk therapy, through EMDR, but it's going to take time. And really, the first step is admitting you have a problem, is coming forward and saying I need help. From there, there's no perfect way to get that help. What works for me might not work for you. So I
Mhm.
tell a lot of folks, you want to take a multifaceted approach. You want to come at it from every angle you could possibly think of. And one of the angles we don't think of a lot of times is our diet, right? Like maybe you need to stop drinking alcohol. If alcohol is popping
Mhm.
up as a problem in your life, you're going to need to eliminate that. Or maybe you just need to change your diet because you're eating like crap And if you get some whole foods in you and some natural foods, some unprocessed stuff, that's going to make you feel better and give you the energy you need to work on your mental health. Maybe you need to go through EMDR and process all that trauma out of there, which I highly recommend, by the way. But, or go through the ASAP. Maybe you need to get back into physical fitness, do yoga, do something. As long as you're doing something and you feel like you're moving in the right direction, that's going to give you some healing. Does it end? Does it end? Does the healing ever end? Does the recovery ever end? And I will tell you, it's been in my 5th year of really working on things hard. It doesn't end, because the minute you think, all right, it's over, I'm fine, something else pops up. And you're like, okay, but that's okay. And when it pops up in the future, you can handle it because you've been through a lot and you have a lot to kind of go back on, and you have all these therapeutic things that you've done. But at the end of the day, I just tell folks, you want to take a wellness approach, you want to take a multi-angle approach to it. You want to keep track of things. I highly recommend journaling. I highly recommend writing things down, because you'll be surprised how quick your progress, when you start getting the help you need, how quick that progress is fixing things and moving things around in your life, that things start to get better. And you don't even realize it, because you just feel better, but you don't realize where you came from. And when I wrote my book, I had kept a diary, or a journal, and I went back and I looked at a lot of the old stuff that I wrote. I'm like, wow, this has been one heck of a ride. And you're going to see a lot of those negative cognitions I mentioned earlier, a lot of negative self-talk. It starts to shift, and you start to be more compassionate with yourself and understanding. And if it takes you 6 months, takes you a year, takes you 10 years, whatever, as long as you're heading in that right direction, that's what counts.
That's exactly it. So I really love this question. And you guys know kind of the way I do my episode guides that I send out, but I really loved this question as we kind of transition into the final part. If you were standing in front of a class of rookies that had never done this job before, what's the one thing you tell them to ensure that they make it to retirement?
Well, I think the obvious elephant in the room is prioritize your mental health. Don't ignore the warning signs. I would often list out, what those warning signs are. But, the reality of it is you're not invincible. You breathe, you bleed, you live the same as everybody else. You put your pants on the same way. Just because you're wearing a uniform doesn't make you different in that sense. You're more susceptible to the adverse effects of the job, the negative side of the job. So don't think you're broken. Don't think that you can't get the help you need. And really what it comes down to is just asking for help. And the earlier you ask for help, the more likely you're going to get the help you need and continue on your career to retirement.
That's good. So tell us about your nonprofit before we get out of here and close everything down. Like, what is the nonprofit? What are you guys doing? And what's your goal for the nonprofit?
So we're based out of Danielson, Connecticut. So it's up in the Northeast. Called the name of the group is the Quiet Corner Peer Support Group. So we started in December of 2024. Really didn't start getting going until 2025. It was around February. But as far as our group, we have 35 members. They're all volunteers. We have one part-time paid staff that does it. She's the program director, so she runs kind of the financial end of things. But as far as the services we provide, it's really critical incident call-outs. So we go to any sort of first responder or military incident that is requiring some sort of mental health element to it, whether critical incident or peer-to-peer stress. Whatever it is, people can call us and we'll respond. It's a free service. We just recently leased out a space. So we have a 1,500 square foot wellness center that is currently under construction that will be opened at the end of January. And that's going to be a place where people can go to have therapy sessions. So we have 2 therapy rooms, EMDR or talk therapy. We have a substance abuse counselor that will handle that end of things. And we also have a classroom that can host about 50 students. So we're going to be running the ASAP program out of there, as well as some other wellness programs. And then we have a yoga studio. So we're going to be doing trauma-informed yoga. That's all free for first responders and military veterans. Being a nonprofit, I will tell you, it can be a little challenging to find funding sources. We're very fortunate that the town of Killingly funded us $166,000 as a startup money.
Wow.
They did it through the opioid settlement fund. We are concentrating a lot on substance abuse issues, which you're seeing a lot of that in the first responder community and military community anyway. So that's something that we're focused heavily on. But we also feel that if you can get at the trauma and help people process it, usually the substance, it goes hand in hand. So it's something that if we can get in there sooner than later. But as far as the organization, like I said, we had 35 members, police officers, firefighters, nurses, medical doctors. We have a substance abuse counselor, EMDR therapist, a chaplain. We have a canine and Hope, which is my therapy dog, and then we had another canine, but unfortunately that dog is ill right now, so she's unable to respond. But we just kind of thrown everything at the wall and whatever we can do to help our brothers and sisters. And like I said earlier in the podcast, we've had 41 critical incidents in a short period of time. And one of the things that I'm really proud of those responses, we prevented 2 suicides. So we actually interrupted 2 suicide events where we were able to get people help, and they're doing
That's
really
amazing.
well today. And I truly believe in my heart that if we weren't there to answer the call, that it probably would have went the other way, and they would have become one of the statistics that is just drowned out by the rest of the statistics. So something I'm very proud of. As far as the future, we have a lot of things in the works. We definitely want to share our model. So if anybody's interested, they can reach out to me and I'll share how we're doing things. And it's no secret. We're very transparent in what we do, and it works. It's working really well.
That's amazing. So tell us where we can find Keven McNeill at. Where do we go if we want to see more of you?
Well, you can find me on TikTok, which my kids told me to go on TikTok. I'm not a TikTok person. I had to really figure out how to use TikTok. But you can find me at Keven McNeill. That's my handle. You can find on our website, which is www.qcps.net, or you can find us on Facebook, Quiet Corner Peer Support Group. We have a social media presence. It's gaining momentum, but like anything, it just takes time to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, those are the platforms. And you can also find the book on Amazon. There's actually a new book that's just came out this past week. It's called
Really?
We didn't sign up for this. So I do a deep dive into PTS and pull back the curtain on that and talk about the recovery part of things. I don't really get into that in the book. I'm pushing it down, but in this book I get into it, and then I give some real life examples of what folks can do to help them get out of that dark place.
Yeah, I love that. So for everybody listening right now who feels they can't push it down for one more shift, what's your final message to them?
You don't have to live in that darkness anymore. All you need to do is just find the courage to speak up. And I promise you this, if you lean into the storm and push your way through it, you're going to come back stronger than ever.
That is fantastic. Well, Keven, I think those are great words to end on. You have been a fantastic guest, and we are so proud of what you're doing. And thank you for coming on and supporting us and giving us some of your time. We appreciate that. If you guys ever want a good guy to follow on the social media platforms, Keven is it. Again, Keven, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yep. And guys, as always, you can find us on all the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. And we stream every Friday, new episode drops. And we stream on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube, where you can go and watch our videos. And the video version is also on Spotify, and you can choose between video and audio. So whichever you prefer, go and listen to us, give us likes and comments. That just lets the platforms know that we're putting out good content. So of course, as always, thank you guys for joining us. And this is the end. So again, Keven, thank you. And for you guys, as always, be safe, take care of your mind, and we will talk soon. Goodbye, everybody.
You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.